Without any further delay, we're going to get into the afternoon's business, and I'm happy to pass the microphone off to Kim, who's going to be moderating this conversation, which will lead us naturally into the incredible work we're all going to do this afternoon. Here you go.
Thank you, Michelle, for that great warm-up. I mean, the after-lunch segment is always tough because, you got to whip the crowd up again and build that energy. Anyway, so what would eco-asset management look like in practice on the ground through a local government lens? That's what we're talking about. And I wanted to sort of flash back in order to look ahead. And a quick show of hands, how many people in this room actually have heard the name Ian McCard and Design with Nature? A surprising number, Because it really is, interesting to look back because, I think it was 1967 he actually started writing the book Design with Nature. So a half a century later, eco-asset management is another call to action to design with nature. So thinking of what Bob said last night, if you look at that quote from Ian, the shaping of land for human use ought to be based on an understanding of natural process. But how about the last part? Let us green the earth, restore the earth, heal the earth. So Ian McCard has had a tremendous influence on people. And while he's most famous for Design with Nature as a landscape architect, he also is considered to be the father of GIS because he introduced the layered approach. So half a century ago, so it's back to the future. So in terms of, what would it look like in practice through a local government lens, obviously in the next few minutes we're not going to be able to show you the great details. Rather, what we're trying to do is just quickly build on the morning keynote and prime you for the concurrent workshops and introduce the two eco-asset initiatives. And so in that sense, when we get to that part, behind the stage, behind the magic curtain, I'm going to be calling on Jim Dumont and Michelle Molnar. Now actually, Michelle will talk first, just so we make that clear. So those of you who were here last night, you will remember Michelle from the Suzuki Foundation, and then Jim Dumont is the Engineering Applications Authority for the Partnership for Water Sustainability. So they're going to introduce you to the two initiatives that are underway in this province right now, and then we're going to experiment. We're going to engage you in a conversation. So when Jim finishes, I'm going to run down with the microphone and I'm going to come out there into the crowd and we're going to pose a couple of questions to get the conversation going, just to get you going and energized in preparation for the sessions that will be later on. And then I'm going to run back up on stage and provide you with a closing reality check. It's a busy slide, right? I just want to convey a couple of key concepts. So managing by the numbers, I used the soundbite this morning to say, for the past decade, thought leaders have encouraged practitioners to think like a system rather than like an accountant. And I'm pleased to report that David Allen is in the room right now because I did acknowledge you previously, David, and I'm going to show your face again. Right? But just to kind of give you, everyone here, a bit of a sense in terms of as we get practical, you've heard Manny refer to PSAB, the Public Sector Accounting Board, and you've heard the words asset management. But just to kind of give you a context, if a simple way of of giving you something to remember about PSAB is that it assumes that the asset value drops to zero after 40 years. So that's the accounts, right? There's no value after 40 years. Asset management is recognizing that the asset actually can't have value after 40 years. So that's a huge shift. But really where we're at now in British Columbia is moving in the direction of sustainable service delivery. And David, this morning I did reference and recognize this table in terms of having now you at the same table as Wally and what you're trying to accomplish with sustainable service delivery. Focus on the service, not the asset, right? And the community determines what the services are important, the level of service that is desired, and how to deliver it sustainably. And then that leads into, as a subset, sustainable watershed systems. So again, it's new ways of thinking, it's valuing ecological services, it's thinking like a whole system. I'm repeating this slide from this morning just to drive it home in terms of the sustainable service delivery wheel and how we are trying to move the whole process along this continuum, get your core assets underway, sorted away, and that'll leave you ready to tackle the watershed assets. you know, again, it's important to recognize that we're all on this journey, and this journey just didn't start yesterday. This journey has a 20-year history in terms of, you know, you think about McHarg's quotes from 1967. What was really significant, if you read the preface he wrote to the 1992 edition, so he reflected on the change that had taken place in North America over that first 25-year period, and they were transformational in terms of what, you know, conditions in the 60s. So if we look back, yeah, we're doing a lot better and we've made progress, but if you look ahead, we still have a long way to go, but the trend line is good. So I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the notable milestones over these last 20 years, again, reflecting from a perspective of what we have been doing in British Columbia, you know, and the significance in 1998 of actually getting the East Clayton Sustainable Community going in Surrey, how that made a difference. By 2000, getting University, because of the scale of those initiatives, it allowed us to change the way people thought, to look at drainage differently, to look at communities differently, and that's 20 years ago. And by 2003, we had formed the Green Infrastructure Partnership, and that began to drive a lot of what we were doing in terms of outreach and education. And 2006 was the launch of CAVI, Convening for Action on Vancouver Island, and you know, back then by 2007, the Green Infrastructure Guide was published, and Susan Rutherford of West Coast Environmental Law was key to that. And then, in terms of this valley, the Nature Without Borders in 2007 is significant. So it merits recognition as one of the milestones on the pathway that we're on to a greener, better future. Living Water Smart in 2008 in terms of, you know, that policy framework at the highest level, you know, that's Gordon Campbell's personal legacy, because he got it on a personal basis. He got it about water and what we needed to do. And he got, to give him all credit, he got the policy framework in place that we're now working out the details and implementing. And I must highlight 2014 in terms of what Manny Machado did in the town of Gibsons, because Manny, it hasn't been stated specifically enough today that in 2014, the mere fact that you got, first of all, your accountants to write a statement which you can put in the municipality's financial statement, and that council got it. I mean, that's a huge precedent, because the significance of what Manny did, that's essentially what helped, in a sense, to open the floodgates. And then in 2015, of course, I mentioned this morning in the keynote about the branding. What we're doing now is we're moving towards sustainable watershed systems through asset management. So, you know, we are on target for making things happen. So the latest milestones then in this green infrastructure journey, sort of post 2015, then focus on the services provided by nature. That's significant. And you have the Municipal Natural Asset Initiative, which Manny has mentioned several times. Sponsoring projects, you identified those, to illustrate strategies to value natural assets and influence policy. And then with the Ecological Accounting Protocol Initiative, being undertaken through the partnership, through case studies, a tool to help practitioners calculate the opportunity cost. And that's a kind of a key phrase, right? The opportunity cost of drainage infrastructure, which really means making your decisions differently. So the quick comparison before I hand off, as they work out their opening moments here, is this quick comparison. We have two initiatives. They have the potential to achieve complementary outcomes, albeit at a different scale. And so I think if there's one thing you should take away from Manny's presentation, which again is the importance of establishing a precedent, think back to this morning, one of my first slides when I said the made in BC process, you know, the what, so what, now what. And what did I say under now what? We've got to establish the precedent, because when you establish the precedent, and there can be many precedents, right? There's no one size fits all. That's the key to the British Columbia approach. City of Courtenay, you're establishing a precedent, right? So we learn from these precedents. So coming back to a quick comparison of the MNAI and the EAP. We love acronyms, right? So You know, I think what Manny and being on the road is accomplishing is getting communities to think about eco-assets at the policy level. And that's a fundamental start, because once you got the policies in place, then you can begin to work with the players in the trenches to measure what matters, right? So that's what I meant by the complementary scales. So in terms of the primary audience, with M&AI, you know, target the policymakers and obviously local government staff. With EAP, it's the practitioners, whether they be local government, you know, business or nonprofit. The purpose, well, the purpose of M&AI, demonstrate local government recognition of natural capital using engineer replacement values. Get a fundamental shift in thinking in a very short period of time. And on the EAP side, you know, demonstrating how to implement step 3. So remember that a moment ago, that the David Allen slide? Just think David Allen whenever I say step 3, right? How to get to step 3 on the asset management continuum by developing the means to measure work and capture prices. Objective, on M&AI, influence policy by demonstrating local government commitment. EAP, achieve optimum infrastructure outcomes. Jim Dumont will elaborate. The relationship to sustainable watershed systems with M&AI, establishing those examples of values established for natural assets in demonstration cases. On the other side, opportunity cost evaluation. So with that warm up, come on stage. First, Michelle, there you go.
Thank you.
Pen in your right hand or your left hand.
All right, there, we can do this. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I've been asked to say just a few words about the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative and how, what our initial thinking and testing is with relation to this. So to start, I really wanted to start with a quote from Joseph Stiglitz. He's a Nobel Prize-winning economist, and he noted that what we measure affects what we do. If we have the wrong metrics, we will strive for the wrong things. As an economist, the mandate of economics is how to allocate scarce resources to their best and highest use. Now, economics generally doesn't include nature or natural services into the discipline. The latest version of the discipline was developed in the early 1930s. In the early 1930s, ecology wasn't really a very developed discipline at that time. The population was low, and most importantly, nature seemed limitless. So nature didn't seem like a scarce resource that needed to be factored into the discipline of economics. Today we recognize that it is growing scarce, that natural resources are hitting limits, and it's ripe. The time is ripe for it to be incorporated into economics. So there's been a lot of work done over the last couple decades to start to incorporate nature and nature services into economics, and I think that the work that we're doing with the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative is helping to move this along. What we're doing is we're working with 5 different local governments, 3 in BC and 2 in Ontario. And we're working to test how nature can substitute, how it can safeguard, and how it can complement existing engineered infrastructure systems. We want to see if we can do that more efficiently, and more cost effectively than engineered systems. So what we're doing at the end of the day is asking these 4 questions, 4 standard asset management questions. The first is, what natural assets do you own, do you manage, or are you responsible for? So just like every municipality has a clear inventory of their engineered infrastructure, they should understand what their natural infrastructure is as well. Secondly, what flows or benefits do these assets produce for the city and the wider community? This is that condition assessment question applied to your natural infrastructure. So a city needs to understand how their key environmental assets are providing infrastructure services, what the capacity of the environment to do that is, and whether that can be improved. We're doing that with hydrological models. They're telling us about the capacity of the assets to provide the services of concern. So how much water is a stream conveying? How much is it able to store? How much is infiltrating and perhaps recharging your aquifer? The third question is, what is the value of those benefits? This can be the very contentious question. There are a range of methodologies that are accepted for putting a value on nature's services. What we've gone with, at least with Gibson's to start, and we'll see how it works with the pilot communities, is using a market-based approach. What we do is we ask how much it costs a municipality to replace natural services if they weren't there. So if that wetland was no longer in your community and you had to look to engineered infrastructure to provide the same range of services, that is going to cost you something. And at a minimum, that cost is the value of that natural service. The last question that we need to consider is what it costs to maintain and monitor those natural assets. Although you often hear people say that nature provides services for free, at the end of the day, communities do face very real costs to maintain and to monitor those natural assets. So if we want to see these services provided to a community in the long run, then we need to calculate those costs, to understand those costs, so they make it into government budgets. Okay, one last thing is, unlike man-made infrastructure, which is designed for a very specific purpose, of course, nature is multifunctional. We've been hearing a lot about the range of ecosystem services that nature provides us. Although we might not be able to, and although we might not even want to, put dollar values on each and every service that nature provides, we want to make sure that we don't lose some of those benefits by focusing just on kind of the infrastructure-related category of natural services. So as we're walking through these pilots, we're making sure to take note of those additional benefits that are of concern to local governments, things like wildlife habitat, things like recreation, things like the health benefits that a community obtains from spending time in nature. And we're making sure that those aren't lost in decision making. We're using tools like beneficiary assessment, and multiple account analysis to do those sorts of things. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim to talk about his work.
So as Kim said, we've been working on an ecological accounting protocol and approach that begins by recognizing the importance of the stream in its natural state. Not a thing that carries stormwater, but a natural state. And then we ask the question, how can we impose some drainage function on it while maintaining that natural function? rather than saying, well, we have a drainage system that we want to have some natural features in. That's a completely different question. So I guess the first question I have is, how many people here trust your engineers? Quick, everybody trusts your engineers?
Oh, it's all the engineers.
No, I'm serious. We saw this morning, there was a very simple equation saying discharge equals some three numbers. All this engineering practice, it's in your guidelines, is based on very simple methods and defined methodologies to calculate your peak discharge. None of those engineering analysis captures the environmental value. And because it doesn't capture the environmental value, the engineer can't tell you what value it has, or how important that function is, or how to maintain that function, because that's not part of the guidelines. So what we do have, though, is we have some standard engineering calculations that do go there, but they're considered state-of-the-art. So we've got the standard of practice is generally accepted that doesn't do what you really want it to. And we've got the state-of-the-art that we really need to drag in over the engineers that are kicking and screaming that we're saying we can't do that. We've got to drag that state-of-the-art into common practice. That would provide assurance to the developers that they're getting a fair shake and that everybody's being treated the same way. I think that's fair. The next thing is we have this mind map of WAT, which is natural pathways by which the rainfall actually gets to the stream. In the standard of practice now, it's only surface runoff that gets to the stream. That's it. All the others are ignored. The so what is what we need to do is design an infrastructure that will optimize all of the flow paths and mimic what's happening in nature. If we're going to disrupt it, we better fix it. And now what is, now what? We need to change the standard. We need to change the standard of practice to become the state of the art. And to start that discussion, we brought out this handout here that just documents what the PSAB protocol, the accounting protocol, that the Treasury Board and the PSAB, Public Service Accounting Board, tells you about the accounting. So that's on page 2. On page 3 is documenting how the asset management people can actually tend to ignore the financial guys by including things like retained value, operating costs, replacement costs that aren't included in the financial statements. What we're now suggesting, on the last page, is that we want to start including things like the Sustainable Service Delivery or Ecological Accounting Protocol into the asset management system. We're going to bypass the PSAB stuff entirely because they take 10 years to change their mind. We think we can get the asset managers to work at it much quicker. So we can start including things like net attributed, avoided costs, replacement costs, net factor income, travel costs, and these are all defined there. And we can start including these values right away. We don't have to wait for some PSAB guy to say, yeah, that's a good idea, let's include it. Well, let's just talk to people like Wally here to get it included in the asset management guide. So that's I think that's something that's doable. So 2 things we need to do so far. The next thing is, if the communities are really going to benefit from nature's assets, we need to recognize that they're vital, that their natural condition is vital. And what we see is going forward is there's a real widespread lack of understanding in the relationship between the flow duration and the stream, because fish don't breathe without water, so you need some kind of duration. But the engineering practice says no, peak discharge is all we worry about. So we gotta overcome that. And the way we can overcome that is a bit of education. We need to educate the public. We need to educate the accountants. We need to educate the engineers. And we need to educate government staff. And that's what we need to do. And through sessions like this, we are doing that. The next thing we have to do is apply the widespread application of a standard of practice that changes to state of the art, that reflects the real world hydrology, that actually addresses the flow paths to the stream. So that's what we need to do. And so I'm going to turn this back over to Kim for a couple of slides here.
Thank you, Jim. And